Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we are going to be taking a break from the mass producing, and I'm going to make a birthday card for my mother-in-law. So I'm going to be using this Blooming Branches stamp set and coordinating die from Pinkfresh Studio. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but I really have a thing for Pinkfresh Studio. I really do. It's a problem. They're based out of Texas, so woohoo, go Texas. I'm going to end up cutting that coordinating die 3 times from just some scrap cardstock I have. I already made a cream colored card base and an envelope. This card's a little shy height-wise of 7 inches, and it's going to be a 5x7 card. I'm using these 2 dies from this ornate banner die set, also from Pinkfresh Studio. I am using the 2 biggest, and that is going to create a frame. Excuse me. So it has a total of 5 dies in this set, but I'm not using the smallest banner, and I'm not using the little ornamental seashell, clamshell looking pieces. I'm not using those. I just want to use these 2 to make a frame, and I'm going to cut those out 3 times from, again, some just scrap cardstock. I'm just going to cut it down and make a frame. I am going to tape those together, but we'll talk about that a little more when we get to it. So I am using a bunch of alcohol markers. These ones are from Altenew. I made the mistake when I first started alcohol marker coloring, because there are numerous brands on the market, and it seems like there are more and more each time. But these ones are from Altenew. Familiar ones might be Copics to you, but there are, like I said, several on the market now. These are the ones I have, and the reason why is because when I first started to alcohol ink marker color, or we'll just keep it simple and say Copic color, I went and bought like a variety pack, thinking that they would blend together and work seamlessly. That was untrue, and that was my own mistake. I didn't do enough research, and I wasted a lot of money with markers that just didn't blend well together, and so I was very, very, very unhappy, and was thinking that this just wasn't going to be something that I enjoyed. And I'm not a huge fan of coloring, but every now and then I enjoy it, and it is a stress relief. So here, the reason why I have these Altenew ones is A, it coordinates with their inks, which is fantastic, and B, they are designed to blend together, which was one of my biggest problems, is I would not know how to find marker combinations that blended well together and played nice. And so I really liked these Altenew ones because they came in packs that you could blend together. They are refillable. You can replace the nibs on both sides. These come with a bullet nib and a brush tip, which is perfect. Copics tend to have a tendency to come with a chisel nib and a brush nib, which I don't know of very many people that use that chisel nib. A lot of creators that I watch end up taking out that chisel nib and replacing it with something different. I'm showing you here that I have like tape on these markers. That just helps me know that these ones are designed to blend together. This is just washi tape that I've taped around an edge, just so I can get clued into that, hey, these are supposed to go together as far as blending goes. So we'll talk a little bit more about these when we actually get into the alcohol marker coloring. But for now, we're going to go ahead and jump into some die cutting. So like I mentioned in the beginning, I'm going to take these 2 largest dies from that ornate banner die set from Pinkfresh Studio, and I'm going to tape them together. This is going to create a frame. So both of these are going to cut, and so I'm going to have a frame in the shape of this banner, and then I'm also going to have like I think it's called a negative piece. I always struggle knowing if that particular part is the negative piece. It's the piece I don't want to use. So in my mind, that's the negative piece. That's probably totally wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments below. And if you've got an easy way to remember what is the negative and the positive of die cuts, let me know, because I would be most appreciative to know what the heck, how to get that right. I would like to know how to get that right. So here I'm just taking some purple satin masking tape from Altenew, and I'm just taping this all together because I don't want this to move. I want all of these banners to be the exact same size. So we're going to go ahead and start die cutting. I pulled out my platinum, my Spellbinders platinum machine, and I'm going to cut out this floral die 4 times total, I believe. 3 times, 4 times. I think it's 4. And I'm going to just pop this out of the die and die cut it 4 more times. I just take my fingernail, you can take a pokey tool and just remove those little negative pieces, because they do kind of, if you die cut over it, it does leave kind of a bump, and I didn't want to leave a bump. So I'm going to go through and die cut these 4 times from just scrap pieces of cardstock I've got lying around, and there they are. Ah, the beauty of video editing. So here they are. Eventually we're going to stack those all together, but here I'm going to go ahead and die cut the frame. Every now and then I like to flip over that self-healing mat just to get some more even wear on it, I guess you could say. I'm also tilting this die. So because that is a blunt straight edge, when you run it through your die cut machine, it has a tendency to make a huge like bump, like a speed bump on it. And so if you tilt it to the side just a little bit, that helps prevent that speed bump effect. So here's that piece that I'm not going to be using, but I will save that. I will actually put that in the back of my die set and save that, because I may need that sometime. I may want that. So for a future card. So I'm going to end up cutting that 3 times. Voila, here they are. We are going to put those pieces I don't want in the back of my stamp pocket, and then I'm going to stack those together. So in my stamping platform, I have, I think, the negative piece, and I'm going to put one of those die cuts in there, and I have underneath that ugly grayish messed up looking piece is just a sticky mat, and I'm just going to lay this in there, and I'm going to stamp on this one. I'm going to make sure that I've got that stuck down really well so that when I stamp on top of it, it's less likely to shift and move around. And I'm going to peel this stamp off and I'm going to lay it down. I'm going to end up kind of messing around, trying to get my head over the top of it to make sure that I've got it lined up well and that it's going to stamp well. If worse comes to worse and it doesn't stamp well the first time, that just isn't the one I color. And it's one of the layering, it becomes one of the layering ones. But thankfully it lined up pretty well. I was pleased with how it lined up, and I figured if I tried to line it up again, I'd just mess it up and mess up a different area, so I ran with it. I am going to stamp this with Gina K amalgam ink. Because I'm going to do Copic or alcohol marker coloring, this ink is safe for that particular technique. Now, I've mentioned in previous videos, I don't like that this is not a very deep, dark, rich black. And so I'm not going to remove this stamp from my stamping tool. I'm going to leave it just like it is, not going to move a thing. And I'm going to go ahead and stamp this one time with that amalgam ink. And I'm going to rub my hand all over the stamp because I've never used it before. So it usually new stamps have a tendency to come with a manufacturing like residue on them. And so if you rub your hand over it or take a white eraser, or some people stamp it with like Versamark ink and then clean it really well, that has a tendency, or others just continue to use the stamp and season it that way. There are lots of ways to season it. This is just the method that I choose because it's the easiest and I don't have to pull out something else. So I'm just going to go ahead and ink that up with that amalgam ink and stamp it down. And I'm pleased with the positioning. I didn't stamp it very well in the center, but that wasn't super critical because, again, it's in a stamping platform and I can just stamp it again and get a better, crisper image. Again, that would not be a big deal just because I am going to go back and stamp this with VersaFine ink just to give me a crisper, deeper, richer black outline. This stamp set actually comes with coloring stencils. So if you don't like to color, or you just don't have the time to color, it does have a coordinating stencil set, which is very beautiful. And normally I would use that, but I tried to do something a little different and something that I wanted to kind of practice in, and something that takes a little more time for my mother-in-law because she is a spectacular human being and she needed something a little more special. So we're going to go ahead and get into the Copic coloring. Right now I'm trying to map out where I want certain colors of my flowers. So I have picked purple and yellow. Those are complementary colors. They are opposite each other on the color wheel, and so they work really, really well together. Purple is my mother-in-law's favorite color, and so I wanted to make sure that I incorporated some purple in her card. So here I am just mapping out the flower centers. The flower center is going to be the opposite of what the flower color is. So if I have a purple flower center, the flower is going to be yellow. And I'd still, the whole purpose of mapping is to give you an idea on where you're going to put what, just kind of a game plan. And my game plan, I messed up in 2 spots. Not a huge deal. It didn't help me make things go a little bit faster, but again, it was still kind of I still messed up in a couple spots, but that's okay. It still turned out well in the end. My whole purpose of color mapping was trying my best to make sure I didn't have the same color flower next to each other, particularly if they were in close proximity to one another. But I did want to have more purple on the card than yellow, so it worked out in the end. I'm using the lightest color of these color blends to map things out, because if I find out that I don't necessarily like something or it's in the wrong spot, if I wanted to risk it, I could go ahead and take the other color and go over it. But because alcohol markers are meant to lay on top of one another, you will get some weird blending. You will still see the other color underneath, if that makes sense. So I chose not to do that because if you mix purple and yellow, you're going to get brown. So I tried not to mix them together. I just kind of ran with it. This is me coloring in real time. In full disclosure, full honesty, I am, like I mentioned, I'm not a colorist. I just do very, very basic coloring. You will notice throughout this video, I'm going to eventually speed this up because this took me over an hour because I'm that slow. You will discover that I do flicking away from myself, I do flicking toward myself, and I'm using the brush tip of those markers. That is because I am not well versed in this. I have not practiced it enough to know which direction I prefer and which direction is most comfortable. That will come with time, with practice, which I have not done yet. And so you'll see me do both. I think that I prefer to flick away from myself, I think. You'll also discover that sometimes I keep the paper where it is and just kind of flick in a radiating circle around, and then other times I actually shift the paper around so I'm flicking in the same direction. Again, that is just because I am not well versed. I haven't practiced it enough to know what works best for me. So, this is just the lightest color of the yellows. Now, this yellow blend, I have 3 markers here. I didn't like the darkest color, so I chose not to use it. But there is a 4th color in that color blend. I just didn't like it, so I didn't use it. I thought it was too autumnal. It was just very dark and almost brown, and so I chose not to use it. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and speed this up because, like I said, I had over an hour worth of footage. I am not fast when it comes to this kind of coloring. Again, that's because I haven't practiced it. So I am going to go through, and I like to go lightest to darkest and then darkest back to my lightest. Speaking's hard, y'all. Kelly Taylor does this particular process of lightest to darkest, darkest to lightest. And I see where that was beneficial. Because if you look at this with just the first, I guess, coating or round of ink, it doesn't have a very pretty blend. And so it looks very splotchy and not cohesive. And so going lightest to darkest and darkest back to your lightest really helps that. Here I'm going to do color mapping with the purple. I'm just laying the lightest color down all over the leaf first, and then I'm going to go in with the next color up. I'm sorry my head gets in the way. I've tried to crop this several times to keep my head out of it, but then I was worried that you wouldn't see the coloring. So sorry about that. You can see here that I am turning my paper a little bit, and I think that helps me. I think I do prefer to flick away from myself and turn the paper so that I can do that. Even when the leaf is closer to me, I can still flick away from myself if I flip the paper around. That might make you dizzy, so sorry. If you want to see something slower and you're watching this on YouTube, you can always go to your settings and slow it down. I would recommend muting the video, otherwise I'm going to have like a crazy sounding voice, and so if that doesn't bother you, then go for it. But otherwise, go ahead and mute the video. So here I'm just going in, I think this is the second to darkest shade. When you're coloring and you want to have depth, something that I've learned from watching other people that are much better colorists than myself is you want to see the most of your midtones. So the colors that are in the middle, you want to see the most of those. You want to see very little of your highlight or your lightest color, and you want to see very little of your darkest color. You want to see the most of your lightest, of your midtones. So try to keep that in mind. And then if you discover that you've lost all of your depth or you've lost all of your highlight, one of the things you can do if you've lost all your highlight is to go in with a white jelly roll pen and just add highlights in. Or you can go over with a colorless blender, or you can go over with your lightest color and try to gain some of that back. You do run the risk, if you're going over and over and over it with a colorless blender or the lightest marker, is to cause some bleeding, because the paper can only absorb so much ink. So if you're discovering that you're starting to bleed outside of the lines, then just use a jelly roll pen, a white jelly roll pen, to add the highlight in. If you've discovered that you've lost your darkest color, just go back in with it. Or go back in with a complementary color, so a color that is opposite your color on the color wheel, and that will tone it down and make it darker. Or go in with a black. You will actually see me do that in this video. So with the greenery, I used the lightest green for the leaves that had a vein running through them. And then I used the second lightest, or the second darkest, to add in the greenery on the leaves that did not have a vein running through them. I was trying to give myself some variation without having to pull out another combination of colors. And so to do that, I just start with a different color. So here I was looking and I was like, man, there really isn't much difference between these two. They look very similar. And so I went in with the very lightest color, which I didn't even start with, but this is the very lightest color in that combo pack. And that still wasn't giving me what I wanted. So I was like, well, maybe I'll just go through and just go over the whole leaf with the darkest color on the leaves that I wanted to be the darkest. I still didn't like that very much. So here I'm going to take a Faber-Castell brush pen. This is actually waterproof. So this is not even really like a Copic marker, an alcohol marker, I don't think. And I am just putting a dot or a line at the base of the leaves that I wanted to be the darkest. Here they almost look blue. I don't know if that's on your screen also, but they almost look blue in my screen. But they are a deep dark black, a deep dark green, sorry. So I am a messy colorist, and I got out of the lines so much. And so I just took a 0.08 jelly roll pen, Sakura jelly roll pen, and I am just using that to fix the spots where I went out of the line. And that seemed to really help and kind of clean up the whole image. And there it is, all colored. So because I wanted that to be a deeper, darker black, I put everything back in my MISTI, and I put that little grid transparency over just to make sure that I hadn't shifted anything and everything was good. So I went back and I stamped that twice. Probably didn't need to stamp it twice, but I did. And so I'm going to pop that out, and I'm much happier with how that looks. So I have a little stamp that was given to me from Altenew, and I just stamped that with the back of the card. And we are going to go ahead and glue all of these frames together. And then we are going to glue all of the flowers together while those flowers that we colored dry a little bit more, while the ink on them dries a little bit more. I'm just using my mini MISTI to help me just apply some weight and some pressure to these while these die cuts dry, just so I can make sure that I've got good adherence on them. So now that I've got that all done, I am just kind of mapping out where I want to put my greeting and where I want to put my florals. I looked at it at the top, didn't really like it, didn't look bad. This just seems to nestle in right here in this orientation, and so that's where I'm going to keep it. I'm going to go ahead and glue everything down. I'm going to glue that frame down. And then I'm going to add some foam tape to the back of the floral in some strategic places, because not all of the floral is going to touch evenly the frame and the card base. And so I have to do some strategery in order to get this to sit correctly. So there's no sagging or high points. So I went on Etsy and I found this company called Blingy Thingy, which is hilarious. And I made a purchase. I purchased a whole bunch of sequins, and then I purchased a pearl and gem and sequin mix from this company. And these are the ones that I thought would look nice on top of as flower centers. So in reality, I didn't even need to worry about coloring these flower centers. I was going to end up covering them anyway. So, lesson learned. But anyway, I didn't know that at the time, so I colored them. But I'm just going to pour out just a few of these, and I'm going to place these in the center of the, I'm going to place the purple ones in the center of the yellow flowers. And then there are some white ones that I'm going to place in the center of the purple flowers. And then she had almost like a clear droplet, almost like a crystal clear, no like iridescence, it's just shiny, pack. And I kind of spread those out, and they almost look like water droplets on the card. They're really, on the card, they're really, really pretty. I'm using a jewel picker tool that is actually supposed to be for like placing rhinestones for like nails, but I don't use it that way. And so I purchased that off of Amazon a long time ago, and it works really well for this. So I'm going to go ahead and glue down and place, like I said, the purple on the yellow flowers and the white on the purple on the yellow flowers and the white on the purple flowers. That's what I'm going to do. So now those are all glued down. All those gemstones are glued down. The frame is glued down. And so now I need to do some strategic placement of foam tape. This is Instant Dimension foam tape from Altenew. And I just took off a section of it and wrapped it around an old like ribbon tube. There's gapping. So I am going to place this foam tape on certain sections of the back of that floral image so that we don't get sagging, we don't get high points, just so everything can sit a little more evenly. And I'm going to do the same thing to that happy birthday sentiment. There are just sections of it that are going to sit up high and others that are going to droop. So I'm going to put foam tape on the back of that also. So here I've got all my foam tape positioned where I need it so that we don't have the sagging. And then I'm going to apply liquid glue to all the other areas, and I'm even going to apply just a little dollop of liquid glue. I'm sorry, I'm kind of out of frame here. To even that foam tape, just so that if I need to wiggle this around a little bit, I can. I didn't have to. Christmas miracle. But if I needed to, I could have. So I'm going to set that down, and I'm going to do the same thing to the happy birthday sentiment, and I'm going to glue that down and remove the backing to the foam tape. So now I've got the sentiment and the florals glued down, and now I'm just going to add just a little bit more sparkle because it's a birthday card, so it should sparkle. And like I mentioned before, she is a spectacular human being, and she sparkles, so her card should sparkle. And I'm going to place just a few of those here and there and glue those down with my liquid glue. Because these are clear, I'm using a glue that when it dries, it too will be clear. You want to use a glue that dries clear, particularly if you're doing a clear sequin or gem. You want it to be clear and dry clear. So we're going to glue all those down, and then this card is complete. Thank you so much for watching. I know this was kind of a longer video. I didn't intend it to be, but it turned out to be long. So I hope you had some popcorn and a beverage of choice to keep you hydrated and fueled for this marathon video. Until then, we will catch you next time.